Hello everybody, welcome to this instruction video. In this video I'd like to show you part 2 of Charlotte's Universe. Charlotte's Universe has been designed by Deidre Uys from Look at What I Made, and the link to the pattern is in the video description. In part 2 we're going to be making this triangle here. And as you notice I'll be using different colors, and my color placement you can find on my blog. I have a link for that in the video description as well. The yarn that I'm using is Scheepjes Stonewashed yarn, and I'll be making all of these rows a different color. The original pattern uses only one color for all of this, and that's also what I'll be showing you in the video, because the version that I'll be making in the video is actually this version, and then specifically of course part 2, which is the green part here. So that's what you'll be seeing in the video. This is a different yarn, so that's what I made the first part with. But I'll be taking you step by step through all the rows that make up part 2 of Charlotte's Universe. If you're looking for the other handed video, so the right or the left handed video, a link for that is in the video description as well. Let's get started. Row 19. I'm going to start immediately after a chain 2 corner space. I have a new color yarn on my hook. And we're going to start by making a standing cluster stitch. Here's the chain 2 space. We're going to leave that unworked. And you've got here the first, second and third stitch. And over those 3 stitches we're going to be making our first cluster. Especially this first one here after the chain 1 space. Be mindful that that is a stitch there. You don't accidentally skip that and then only start here, for example. So those the first 3 stitches going to do the first cluster on. Now this is going to be a standing cluster. I'm going to yarn over on my hook and just keep a hold of that. Then into that first stitch, pick up a loop, take off 2 loops. Then we stop, yarn over and go to the next stitch, pick up a loop, take off 2 loops, and again yarn over to the third stitch, take off 2 loops, 4 loops on your hook, take them all off in one go. Chain 2. Now we're starting the repeat unit with that chain 2. And now we're going to do a cluster stitch again over the next 3 stitches. So this is the next stitch. You see that's the one where we stopped. So on the next stitch we're going to start the first half of a double crochet and then stop. The next leg again and stop, and then again yarn over in the next stitch and take off 2 loops. Again 4 loops on your hook, take them all off. This you're going to repeat till the end. I'll show you the repeat one more time. Chain 2. Then over the next 3 stitches work a cluster stitch. So in the first one, the first leg, and the second one is the second leg, and then the third one, the third leg. 4 loops on your hook, take them all off. I now have 3 cluster stitches. I'm going to repeat this till the end, till you get to this point here. I'm just going to show you one more repeat and then I'll do a jump in the video. So it's chain 2. On the next stitch make a cluster by working over 3 stitches. This is basically a double crochet 3 together that you're working here. Take them all off. Continue until you're to the end of this edge, then I'll just show you this last stitch here also. I'm almost to the next chain 2 corner space on this center triangle. I'm going to show you the last repeat. That's chain 2. You should have 3 stitches left before the chain 2 corner space. You can see those 3 stitches there. It's the last stitch worked, so I can go on to the next stitch and then the stitch after, and over these 3 stitches I work my last cluster stitch. 4 loops on your hook, take them all off. This completes your first row, row 19. It's important to just check that your stitch count is correct here, because if it's correct here it will most probably be correct for the next rounds also. You're going to make sure you have 14 of these cluster stitches, and of course then you'll have 13 chain 2 spaces in between. So make sure you have 14 cluster stitches, and then you're ready for the next row. Row 20. Going to turn our work in this row. We do a chain 3. This counts as your first double crochet. And then turn your work the other way, so you now have the back side of the square facing the reverse side. So that chain 3 is your first double crochet. Going to skip the next chain 2 space, it's going to be this one, and then work a double crochet on the next cluster. I just want to show you exactly where that stitch is. You see here, here's the cluster stitch you worked. Then there, if I just pull this a little bit apart, that there is the stitch that's on the cluster stitch. You might think it's this little almost eye there. It's not. That is actually part of the chain stitch that you made. If you look at it from this side, it may be more logical to you. You see that there is the stitch that's the cluster stitch, and then this here forms a bit of an eye. So that there is what you're going for. If I turn it back now, you see that's the, if you work on the cluster stitch, you're going to work in there. And that's also where we're going to work our first double crochets, on that cluster stitch. So we're working a double crochet on the next cluster. So it's going to be on that stitch there. And then go onto the chain 2 space and work 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. And 2. And again a double crochet on the next cluster. So again that's going to be that loop, that stitch there, and not that eye. So be aware, it's not there, it's here. And these last 3 stitches, the 2 stitches in the chain space and then a stitch on that cluster stitch, you're going to repeat this till the end. So I'll show you a few more times. Chain 2 space, work 2 double crochets in there, and 2, and then on the cluster stitch work a double. So that was the second repeat. I'm going to do this 11 times in total. Once more, 2 double crochets in the, oh sorry, my yarn is just a little stuck here, there we go. 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space, and then go to your next cluster stitch here and work a double crochet on that. I've now done 3 repeats with you, those 3. I'm going to do a few more and then I'll see you just here at the end, just for the last bit. Just on the last part of this edge, you're going to work the last repeat. So I've got here 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space. Then a double crochet on the second last cluster. you're going to skip the next chain 2 space, and then on the last cluster work a double crochet. So this is this cluster we started with, so I'm just going to pull that standing stitch open, and then a double crochet there. So note that you're skipping that last chain 2 space, so don't go autopilot here and work double crochets and then a double crochet in that cluster and then 2 in here and then 1 in there, because then you're going to have 2 stitches too many, so be aware of that. That completes row 20. Row 21, to do a chain 3, and this again counts as your first double crochet. To turn my work again, so now you're going to have the right side of the square of your work facing. And my hook just fell out. There we go. Now we're going to work a series of trebles and double crochets in this row. We're going to skip the first 2 stitches. Now just take a moment to note which 2 that is. You see, this chain 3 counts as a double crochet, and that's on your first stitch. So that there, this is your first stitch, but the double crochet counts for that already. So you're going to skip these 2 stitches, those you're going to skip, and then in the next stitch there's a third one, that one you're going to start. So we're going to skip, that stitch is already worked, that's a double crochet you have, and skip 2 stitches, and here work the next, and that's going to be 1 double crochet. The next stitch should be a stitch that's worked into the cluster. See, that stitch is worked into your cluster. That's a checkpoint for you. Because what we're going to do now is going to work a front post treble around this cluster. So that's why the next stitch should be the one that's in the cluster, because we want everything to line up. So the next stitch is going to be a front post treble around this third cluster. So that one, you see there, 1, 2, 3. Twice over for a treble. Then around that cluster, pick up a loop, and then take off 1, 2, 3 times. Bring it up to where you're currently at. Going to skip a stitch to the back and then work 2 double crochets. If you see here, this is the next stitch we should work, because you see here that there is worked, so we're going to skip that stitch and then go to the next. So in the next stitch, you see how I'm skipping that stitch, go to the next, then work a double crochet and go to the stitch after and also work a double crochet. And these 3 stitches is your repeat unit. So again, I'm going to skip the next the next stitch. We're again going to be working over a treble over that cluster, then skip the next stitch, get to the back. You can see how I'm skipping that stitch, and then in the next stitch work a double crochet again, and a second time also. So now I've done it twice. You can see how you're kind of tying these 2 clusters together. Again, twice over, around the next cluster, work a treble, skipping a stitch to the back. See how I'm skipping that stitch there. Just open this up a little bit more, you can see it better. That there's worked. I'm going to skip that and then continue here. And then work a double crochet and also on the next stitch work a double crochet. Now I have 3 of these treble worked. I'm going to continue this until I'm almost here. When I'm here, I'll see you again. So repeat this until you're here. Almost to the other side. At this point I have 3 clusters left, so I'm going to do the last treble here. That's still part of the large repeat unit. And now you have 2 clusters left, these last 2. I'm going to skip 1 stitch to the back, see that stitch there, then work 1 double crochet. At this point you should have 2 stitches left. You see this stitch and that stitch. These 2 you're going to skip, and in the top of the chain 3 going to work a double crochet. You can see those 2 stitches you still have left, and then in the chain 3 work a double crochet. And this is row 21, and what just might be a good idea is to actually mark your trebles. Just going to open up here that nothing happens to it. What I'm going to do, I'm going to mark not the first and the last, but all the other trebles. I'm going to mark them because we're going to be working bobbles in the next row. It might just make life easy for you if you can easily find them. See, this is my first treble. I don't need that one, I'm not going to mark, but the second one. So that treble stitch, I'm just going to hook a stitch marker in there. And then in the next treble also. And this one I'm just going to do that on all of them except for the last one. Except one you also don't need. I'm just going to hook them up quickly. And that way, it's just a way of making life easier for you. If you don't want to do this, that's just fine. No problem at all. And then here on the second last treble also. So this last one and the first one, you don't have to mark those. But here in the middle on all of these, we're going to be working bobbles in the next row. So that's why I'm marking them. Row 22, again we start with a chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and this again counts as your first double crochet on that first stitch. I'm just going to turn my work again. So now you again have the back of your square facing. You can see here the marked stitches. I'm going to be working in those in a moment. First we skip the first 2 stitches and then work 2 double crochets. Now again, just take a moment to see which stitches those are. Those 2 stitches you're going to skip. You see this is the very first loop, this is the chain 3, that counts as your first stitch there. Then skip 1, 2 stitches, and then on the next do a double crochet. And also on the stitch after. As you can see, if I just open this up a bit, that you've skipped those 2 stitches and then work 2 double crochets on the next 2. The next stitch should be a marked stitch, so that's a checkpoint for you. And on that marked stitch we're going to make a treble bobble. That's going to be 5 trebles we're going to be working together. So I'm just going to unhook that. So a treble is twice over. The first one. So in that stitch, I'm going to be making 5 of these, 5 legs. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the last one, number 5. this point you'll have 6 loops on your hook. Take them all off, and what I'm going to do is, while I'm doing so, I'm just going to push slightly upwards, so doing that, and that way you don't snag your hook here on any of these loops while you're going through. So I'm just going to pull through, and this is your treble bobble. It won't look like much at the moment, but when we do our next stitch, that's going to be a double crochet in the next stitch. This will actually form a bobble and pop the other way, which will be the front of your work. In the next stitch, that one there, work a double crochet. You can just see that bobble forming there. And also on the next stitch, work a double crochet. And this here is your repeat unit. You can see that bobble there, and the next two double crochets after it. That's your repeat unit. I'll show you once more. Your next stitch should again be a marked stitch, yeah, and that's again an indication that you need a treble bobble in there with 5 legs. So twice over for the treble, and then that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this is leg number 5, all of them in that same space. No, that last one went wrong. Let me just do that again. Twice over, take off 2 loops, take off 2 loops. At this point you have 6 loops on your hook. Take them all off. On the next 2 stitches, work a double crochet on each. So 1 and 2. Now done the repeat 2 times. You can see I've still got a few bobbles, a few marked stitches left here, and on all of these work a bobble and 2 double crochets in between, and I'll just see you here at this position of the last marked stitch. At the next stitch, which is my last marked stitch, and in there I'm again going to work a treble bobble. It's twice over, and that first leg, so you're going to work 5 of these legs again. 2, twice over for the third leg, 4 times, and 5 times, 6 loops on your hook, and take them all off. On the next 2 stitches, work a double crochet on each. So 1 and 2. Your last 2 stitches, and those 2 stitches, going to skip those. Then on the chain 3 space, or actually the chain 3 I should just say, work a double crochet. That's row 22. Just show you what the front looks like at this point. You'll see that these bobbles are really very present, and this is exactly what you want. So that's row 22. Row 23, again start with the chain 3. That counts as your first double crochet. At this point you'll have the right side of your work facing. Going to skip the first 2 stitches and then work 22 double crochets. Let me just show you which stitch is which. This is your first loop, that belongs with the chain 3 double crochet, so that stitch you're not skipping. You're going to skip this stitch and that stitch, and then your first one is going to be here on the bobble. Let me just show you what I mean. If you look here, you'll see this bobble has kind of looks like it has an eye here on the right hand side. That eye is actually the stitch, is the double crochet that's next to it, that's there on the right. That eye belongs to this double crochet, so that's not the stitch that's on the bobble. The bobble itself has a stitch here to the right, to the left of the bobble, here on the left. If you're left-handed, it'll be on the other side, it'll be here on the right. So that is the stitch that belongs to the bobble. Then you have here the double crochet with this, that's the stitch. And you have here the next double crochet, and then that's the stitch that belongs to that second double crochet. And again, this looks like it's the eye of the bobble, but it is actually this double crochet that's next to it. So be mindful of what stitch is which, and then here, that is again the stitch that belongs to the bobble. So what we're going to do is going to work 22 double crochets, and the first one is going to be on the bobble. So here's my first bobble, and on that first stitch I'm going to work the first double crochet, and then number 2 is on this double crochet here, that's 2, and then 3 here looks like it's in the eye of the bobble, but that is actually belongs to the double crochet that's to the right there. Then number 4 is on the bobble again. 5 is a double crochet, so is 6. But 6 again looks like it's in the eye of that bobble. And this you're going to repeat and again until you've worked 22 double crochets. So continue till the end when you've worked 22. In that, what looks like the eye of the bobble is the second last stitch, and the number 22 is on this last bobble. That's your last stitch, that's number 22. At this point you should have 2 stitches left, those 2. I'm going to skip those, and on the chain 3 top of the chain 3 work a double crochet. That completes row 23. Row 24, again a chain 3. This counts as your first double crochet, and then turn your work to have the wrong side facing. You can see here it's got the back of my work facing. And what you're going to do is we're going to work cross stitches in this row. So we're going to start by skipping the first 3 stitches and then work a double crochet in the 4th. So again, skipping the first 1, 2, 3 stitches, go to stitch number 4. As you can see there that I've skipped 3 stitches are left unworked, 1, 2, 3, then go to stitch number 4, in which you work a double crochet. We're now going to come back to the second last stitch, so to what was stitch number 3 here. We're going to come back and work a double crochet in that stitch. So kind of folding your work, getting into that stitch, pick up the yarn, slightly open up that loop, and then complete the double crochet. That gives you a bit of a that gives you a crossing here. That's a cross stitch. We're going to do that basically to the end. I'm going to skip the next stitch, then the stitch after, do a double crochet, and then come back to the stitch I skipped and work a double crochet in there. And again, skipping the next stitch, go to the stitch after, work a double crochet, then come back to the stitch skipped, pick up, slightly open up, and complete the double crochet. Skipping the next stitch, you can see this rhythm, how you're going to be making crosses, and then come back, pick up and complete. I've now done 4 of these. I'm going to do this also on the rest of this edge, and I'll see you over here. Need to do my last cross. I'm going to skip the next stitch, and in the stitch after work a double, then come back to the stitch I skipped and work a double crochet. At this point you should have 9 of these crosses. That's just a check for you that you've got 9 of these. And at the end here you should have 2 stitches left unworked. I'm going to skip those last 2 stitches, and then in the chain 3, the top of that chain 3, just get in there properly, work a double crochet again. That completes row 24. Row 25, we're starting with the chain 3, so we're starting basically every row, and turn your work to have the front side facing. What we're now going to do is we're going to work puff stitches between our crosses. If I just show you, here's a cross, you see there's 2 double crochets. You've kind of between the posts of these double crochets, if I just open this up a little bit, in there, so between those 2 posts, in that little hole there, that's where we're going to be working puff stitches. And we're going to be skipping the first cross and start in the second. So hook up my yarn again. Now, a puff stitch means that we're going to be picking up loops and then taking them all off in the same go. I'm going to yarn over, and then in that first space pick up a loop. Got 3 loops on your hook now. Again, yarn over, and in that same space pick up a loop. Got 5 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pick up a loop. Got 7 loops on your hook. Again, yarn over, pick up a loop, and now you've got 9 loops on your hook, and all of these you want to take off in one go. So let's yarn over, and again, while I'm doing so, I'm just going to push upward to make sure I don't accidentally snag anything while I'm pulling through. And chain 1. This is your puff stitch. These 9 loops you took up and that chain 1. This is the puff stitch. Then again, chain 1. And this chain 1 is part of the pattern, and that first chain 1 is part of the puff stitch. Now we work and this is also our repeat unit until the second last cross. So in the next cross, in between there, again pick up a loop. You're doing this 4 times. 2, 3, 4 times. That brings you to 9 loops. You're going to take off and chain 1, that's the puff stitch, and then another chain 1 for the pattern. Another puff stitch, and then between the next crosses, it's 2, 3, 4, take them all off, chain 1, and another chain 1 for the pattern. So I've now done this 3 times. I'm going to work the next 3 crosses also, and then I'll see you at this point when I've completed the puff stitch. Just completed puff stitch number 6 here. Already done the chain 1 that belongs to the puff stitch, another chain 1 for the pattern, And then in the second last cross, you see I've got 2 crosses left, so in that second last one, again between the posts work another puff stitch. Means and 4 times that you yarn over and pick up a loop, 9 loops on your hook and take them all off, and chain 1. That's your last puff stitch worked. Going to skip this last cross here and then work a double crochet on the chain 3. And I just need to get into that. There you go. And that's row 25. Row 26, chain 3 as always up till now. Turn your work and have the wrong side facing. We're now going to work 2 double crochets in each of the chain 1 spaces that's between the puff stitches. So here's the first space between 2 puff stitches, going to work 2 double crochets in there. So that's 1 and 2. So that means you're going to do 12 of these double crochets in total. So in every chain 1 space, technically it's not a chain 2 space, of course, because your first chain 1 goes with your puff stitch. So I've now done that 3 times. I've got 3 more of these. So in that next space work 2 doubles and 2, and here we work 2 doubles. And in this last chain 1 space, so between these last 2 puff stitches, work 2 doubles. You're going to then go to the chain 3 that's here at the beginning, and on that close with a double crochet again. And I'm having trouble getting into it properly. There we go. Work a double crochet. So you now have 14 doubles. So you've got one here at the beginning, one at the end, and 12 in the middle. Row 27 is getting reasonably short at this point. Chain 3, that's again your first double crochet, and turn everything around once again. That brings you to the front side facing. Going to skip the first 3 stitches and then work 6 double crochets. This first goes with the double crochet, the chain 3, so you're not going to skip that. So skip here 1, 2, 3 stitches. Then in stitch number 4, work a double crochet, and we're going to work 6. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then on the last one, that's number 6. At this point you should have 3 stitches left. You can see those 3 stitches there. You're going to skip those, and then on the chain 3 work a double crochet again. Now, and this is different from the other rows we've done up till now, chain 1, so not chain 3, only chain 1, and again turn your work. You're going to have the back side of your work facing for the last row. Row 28, last row. I'm going to be doing, so I'll just show you here. If you have these 6 double crochets here in the middle that we just worked, I'm going to skip the first 2, and then we're going to work in 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6 we're going to skip again. So those 2 we're skipping, and then work here in the middle 2. And we're going to start the first one with a 5 treble bobble. So again, twice over. Then in that 3rd stitch, work a 5 treble bobble. So that's a treble, 5 together. So this is leg number 3, leg number 4, and number 5. 6 loops on your hook, take them all off. In the same stitch, but you already will have this treble bobble in that same stitch, work a double crochet. And this is kind of going to tie your bobble together, this double crochet. And a treble, so twice over. In the same stitch, work a treble. 2, 3 times off. So that completes your 1/2. Chain 2. And this chain 2 is going to be your new corner for the new square. On the next stitch, again a treble. So 1, 2, 3. Now take note, now we work a treble bobble, so it's not symmetrical with this first half, because here we did a treble, double, and then the bobble, but now we're going to do the treble, bobble, and then the double, so they're not symmetrical. Don't worry about that, that's correct. That's just to give you a nicer finish on the corner. So a treble bobble, so that's again 5 legs worked together. 2, 3, this is leg number 4, and number 5. 6 loops on your hook, take them all off. The last stitch is in the same position where you're currently in. You already made the treble and the bobble. In that same stitch, do a double crochet. You can see how this double crochet is helping you to kind of bring that bobble together. So that's why they're in the reverse order, otherwise this bobble wouldn't look so nice. You're going to have 2 stitches left that you're going to skip, and then on the chain 3, the top of the chain 3, close with a slip stitch. And now you can cut your yarn and open up. Just going to cut and then open this up, and now work away this yarn tail. And this is the triangle that we just worked, that chain 2 space and these last 2 bobbles that we worked. So everything that you've just done here on this one edge, going to repeat that on the other 3 edges also, and that will then complete part 2 of Charlotte. I want to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again for part 3.